Hey everybody, it's Ted Padromo, and this is our Tuesdays with Ted. And this is a show I just like to invite interesting people that I meet along. And I met Valerie on LinkedIn. And was it just a message on LinkedIn, or did someone introduce us?
You actually posted something that I just replied to because I agreed with you on what you were posting. And I don't know if we met through other connections or what really happened with it. But I liked what you were saying. And you were talking about not being a jack of all trades, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I
So
looked at
it's
your
been a
profile and I said, "Oh, Valerie looks very interesting." And then we got on the call and chatted, and here we are today.
sometimes,
Funny how this
yeah,
networking
sometimes
works.
interesting more than other days.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So tell us what you do about your company.
Yeah, well, I'm in the fractional space, and that is a space that is kind of near and dear to my heart, and probably why I replied about your comment of being jacks of all trade, because we've gone a bit to, in the job market, we've gone a bit to trying to specialize and get more specialized and more specialized. And in the labor market and just the up and coming labor force, there it feels a bit like there needs to be just some um, knowledge transfer. We call it tribal transfer, but tribal knowledge. And there's a lot that can benefit from that sort of transfer, that brain dump, right? And so when COVID hit, I found that there were a lot that had not entered the fractional chief revenue officer space, and a lot that confuse kind of what a VP of sales does versus a chief revenue officer and some of those other roles that you see a lot of fractional. And you do see a lot of fractional CFOs, chief financial officers out there. And so when I decided to go into the fractional world, there was also a lot of miscommunication on what a consultant does and does not do versus a fractional leader does and does not do. And I just found that there were, and I think you and I talked about it a little bit, but 99% of the um, businesses in the United States, and my business partner out of the UK, incidentally, the UK, 99% of them are in the small business realm, right?
Yeah.
And there is a stat, I'd have to go look up where I found it, but there is a stat that basically states that that about 84% of them failed due to cash flow, primarily due to cash flow, and then it's primarily due to recognition in the marketplace. So marketing, that kind of stuff, right? Because they
Mhm.
just can't get the top line revenue. And I thought, what a great place to be involved in trying to help these small businesses with that knowledge dump of 25 years, but help them get on the right track, because so many of them fail, in that first little time period, and also make a lot of costly mistakes.
Mhm.
So we started Revenue North Star, which is a team of fractional CROs. So I go around the world, and I have my own clients as well, but I go around the world and also place some of our what we call them revenue agents, you know,
Okay.
and specialize specifically in that arena.
Okay. Yeah, for those not familiar with the fractional world, it's like if a company's not big enough to have a full-time CFO or
Yeah.
CMO or some C-level person. So they bring in someone part-time, in a sense, right?
They do. And, there's a distinction in that as well, because um, sometimes a job requirement requires less hours. So it could be part time. And
Mhm.
sometimes you can have a fractional person that can take that whole brain dump and squish it into less hours because they have that experience, but it's not necessarily, or should have been necessarily, deemed a part-time role, right? So they come in for a fraction of the time, and you can take advantage of that. but it doesn't necessarily say, well, it's the role requirement is only part-time, So anyway, so sometimes people get that confused a bit too, right? A janitor coming in at part-time is, here's the hours. So we don't typically go by hourly rates and things like that.
Right.
So,
Okay. And one
yeah.
thing you said was about making no decision is your biggest competitor.
Right now, no decision is generally across the board the biggest competitor in industries, period. Doesn't matter if it's so Challenger a couple of years ago came out, obviously, with the Challenger sale. And I think Matt Dixon just released Jolt, which there's a few of them out there, but the indecision is due to about 12 in a complex sale. It takes about 12 decision makers to come to consensus.
Mm.
So imagine trying to get 12 decision makers to agree. We can't even agree on a day, for lunch half the time.
Right.
So you've got to have this new skill set on how do I get alignment among an average of 12 decision makers at this point.
So these aren't board of directors, these are just decision makers.
It's just whoever's involved in making that decision. It could be in the C level, but it could be, the C level is asking their managers, their opinions, and you're supposed to bring it to the table. And then purchasing gets involved and they're like, well, this is part of this, and so you have a lot of people who could be just talking about it, and you could have some that are mobilizing toward it. And some see the advantage of it, but because they can't get consensus in there, they won't buy. It's a no decision.
Right.
It's gone.
And timing is
So you've
everything
got,
these days, right? You got to
yeah,
move
yeah.
fast.
Well, and there's a bit of accountability piece involved in that. A lot of people don't want their neck on the line. If something's wrong, then if we all make a decision, then we can all point fingers, right? If something goes right, then we'll just make sure it's us who,
Right. When I worked for IBM, there was nobody ever got fired for hiring IBM.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if they didn't provide the right solution, it's okay.
Yeah. So
Do you have like a process you take people through if you're working with a team and they can't come to a consensus? Do you have any tricks you use to move them forward?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of it can be involved in the beginning sales process, first of all, and upfront contracts for sure in the sales process. Now, I'm not saying just a sales team, because it can be that you're not dealing with a sales team, but really hard to get some kind of alignment if you don't have some kind of humans going through the process. You're not going to get 12 decision makers on a digital something to make a decision usually, unless somebody is really that spearheader. But typically you try to leverage the one who really is the mobilizer of that sale. So if you go back to Challenger methodology, it's that person who wants it the most. You can help them, educate them on the benefits of it so that they can get all the rest of their group to agree. And sometimes that's the CEO, sometimes that's not. It could be a group, like let's say that you had a marketing initiative and you wanted to get this expense across the finish line, and you go through almost a business case to prove why it's okay, right? And you have to be able to train whoever that mobilizer is to either let you on that around the table with all of them, because I usually, when I train a sales team, you're not supposed to email quotes ever. That's the death, right? That's radio silence, right?
Yeah.
You get a proposal meeting together, and if they won't get on a proposal meeting, then you are already in commodity zone anyway. So you might as well, roll the dice, right, on that. And if you're in an RFP zone, you can try your best to do different types of cadence and persuasive writing to help plead your case through an RFP. But again, you're in the biz. So one of the best things is to try to get everybody in the room, but that's hard sometimes, right? So sometimes you do have to leverage whoever you identify as that as that core mobilizer of that sale, the one who really wants it to then champion it through the organization, you know?
Right.
And so you're in essence training, you're training them on how to sell your product. And
Right.
that's why you have so many partnership and marketing efforts together, because that's been really hard to leverage too, is just one person running through an organization. I mean, imagine being around the table with Citibank.
Right.
It's better if that mobilizer at least will try to get you on a meeting and then try to get the meeting coordinated, if anything else.
Right. I can't tell you how many times we talk about a proposal, they give me a proposal, then they never follow up.
Yeah. Yeah. And they never follow up. But then there's the statistic that says it takes up to 5 follow-up calls to actually win, and most give up after 2. So you wonder why they don't follow up. So I'm going to ask you, Ted, why don't they follow up? I'm curious.
And there's sometimes where I'm interested and have a question and I'll reach out to people and it's silence.
Yeah.
It's
And
mind-boggling. Like, it's not that hard to follow up. Just send a little message or call them, pick up
yeah.
the telephone. Oh my gosh, what's that like?
Well, picking up a telephone is like seen as what was it? Cold calling is dead was given a bad hat clear back in 2010 or something like
Yeah,
that. And it's like,
for sure. You
yeah,
have a relationship with them and you're talking about you
yeah,
give them a proposal and they have questions. Call me
yeah.
back or
Well,
return
and
my email.
when I'm training reps, that's all in the upfront contract. They're supposed to have a next step before they ever leave the table.
Yeah.
So a lot of them will do open-ended, like, hey, so what's the next step? Let me know what your calendar's like. And that's it. They don't give any options. They don't do any of that. I think that sometimes people are afraid of being too salesy.
Yeah.
And instead, I think Catherine Brown and I have talked about this, and so has Melanie from Amical. We talked about making it easy for people to buy.
Mhm.
I mean, don't you appreciate what's next? What do we do here? Don't you appreciate having that conversation up front and saying, this is how we do things. If that doesn't really kind of work with what you're doing, let me know how we can either align or, not, and we can move on,
Yeah.
and then if you do end up in some kind of proposal process, the beginning of the proposal sets your next meeting. So
Right.
here's what we do in next steps. We're going to go through the proposal. I know you're going to have some questions. So at the end, and you're probably going to need to mull this over. So let's get something on the calendar right now for our next steps. Because once you lose that 12 people, once you lose it, it's gone, right?
Oh,
I
right.
mean, there's
It
your
took months to
indecision.
get them
You've just
together.
Yeah, and then even to honor, to say, what is your process on making this decision? Because I don't want to be, bugging you, or I do want to be bugging you because I'm going to make that fifth call.
Yeah.
you know, or what is exactly the next steps here? And I mean, we're talking about some qualification things for a sales team. Um, but see, that can be part of the process. Like with a CRO, a lot of it is dealing with how are you going to market to even begin the process of even training and getting alignment and all of that kind of stuff. And what are you looking at 5 years from now? Everybody tells me, they go, why would you look at 5 years? Nobody looks that far out. And I'm like, well, if you don't know where you want to go, then you might as well not get there.
You gotta put
I mean,
something out there, yeah.
so even if it is like a huge swag 5 years from now, and then you just look at the first year for your either your go to market or the most, if you're just honing everything and doing this every single year, at least the ship kind of has a sense. And then you have the ability to say, okay, well, if the market has shifted to indecision as the biggest competitor, how are we going to deal with it?
Right.
What's marketing going to do? What is PR going to do? What are your do we need a sales team? Do
Right.
we go to market with this just digital? Are we a commodity? Are we, and then what do we go to market at what price?
Hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of questions that need looked at in order to decide exactly how you're going to deal with some of that in the future.
Yeah. And when I'm buying something, a large big ticket item, if you seem like you've got your stuff together, and this is how we do business in our company, and they very
Yeah.
clear and they're confident. If you
Hmm.
don't train the salespeople and they're all wishy-washy, I don't
Yeah.
want to do business with you.
No, and I think that that's a little bit in the digital space. I think that's where that's been lost on a few people. A lot of leaders will say, well, let's throw some marketing at it. Let's throw a little social media at it. Our budget is like $2,500 a month for marketing.
Hmm.
But we want to be at 100 million in 5 years from now. I
Hmm.
see you're laughing, but that's what you get. And then it's like, well, can't you do it for less? And it's like,
Yeah.
yes. Yes, anybody can do that for less, but you won't hit your goal, right? Or you won't, I mean, and or maybe that is enough for whatever your widget or your item is, right? Are you
Right.
overspending? I went to the underspending, but when you were talking about, okay, yeah, if it is a very nice car, and everybody's got a different idea of what that nice car is, but if you were going into Ferrari, you would expect certain things that you might not expect from a used car lot,
Right.
right? I mean,
Exactly.
it is different. And if you were um I there are times where I've been talking to um small business owners, and a lot of times they will literally state, well, we're going to throw a few, my brother George at sales, and then I'm going to put I'm going to go ahead and just create a MailChimp account, and we're just going to do some emails. And that might be plenty, but I found a big mistake is when you're really supposed to be in an enterprise space and you think that you're in a widget space.
Yeah.
And that one is different than the other. And it's not necessarily wrong one way or the other unless you're in the wrong space, right? Um, and so if your customer, we talk a lot about mapping the customer journey, mapping where they are on your website. You got Hotjar, you got all these other things, right? And then what we don't take into account is how do they really buy,
Yeah.
right? You can see what they do when they click on something, but that's a lagging indicator. So
Right.
how will people buy your customer? Buy your product, service? What are they going through? And if it is an enterprise then type sale, then why are you investing so much in spam stuff when they're not going to even look at your spam stuff because
Right.
it isn't important to that buyer?
Right.
Then you really do want to invest in the human, or you want to invest in, I don't know, sending a lunch out or go and taking people to lunch, the
Right.
networking side of selling, right? So I don't know.
Yeah, I worked for a software company, and it was like a 12 to 18-month buying cycle because it was 100,000 or more.
Yeah.
So we had different assets. If they came and clicked on certain ads, like what is a CMS, we gave them something that's the beginner's level. When you
Yeah.
got to the executive level, it was more about white papers and Gartner Magic Quadrant reports. And
Yes.
that's what the executives were looking for. They don't care about what is this thing.
Yeah.
So tell me about
Yeah.
the Phoenix effect. You said something about that in the note you sent me.
The Phoenix effect. Oh my gosh, I make this stuff up and I can't make it. Yeah.
I love it.
The Phoenix effect is, to me, and there's a lot of things that come to mind with a phoenix, right? And it's not just Harry Potter. And so the phoenix rises from the ashes, becomes a new creature from the fire, right? That's the lore with the phoenix. And um so there's a lot of companies that are also going through um through change that they are having to reinvent themselves to keep going. Now, you're familiar with Good to Great from Jim Collins, right? I mean, if you aren't, then that's just standard business 101 reading, right?
Right.
Okay. Anyways, and how do you get from good to great? And sometimes what happens is we have companies who have been around for years on end. And in that book, they bring up Walmart, they bring up, Walgreens and stuff like that. And this book was written a long time ago, and he has this new BE 2.0 and all that kind of stuff, right? But as we start to think about what was really the essence of what that was, is it was, how do you stay? How do you get momentum and keep getting that momentum and go from being a good company and becoming a great company and not losing your status as that great company, right? What's the long haul? And so we run in, especially in the fractional space, we run into a lot of companies that have very viable things that they're doing, but they've lost leverage. They've lost to the competitor. They've underestimated market changes, or they haven't paid attention to it. And they've gone to, we were great at one point, but now we're down to either good or less than good,
Yeah.
And so in the fractional space, a lot of times people will hire even a fractional leader to go in and consult on a project, for instance,
Hmm.
and that's great to an extent. That can start it, but the execution piece is not there to create the Phoenix effect. And the Phoenix effect, and sorry, I've got something that's pausing, so I'm leaning forward. The Phoenix effect is something that you take a company and it has to rise from the ashes and reinvent itself. So not just it is a resurrection of sorts, but what resurrection had, and we talk about turnarounds and resurrections, but it has, to me, the meaning of renewing your original self, right? You're resurrected. You are coming back, like in Cats in Memory, where you're taken up and you're now this young whatever, and you're just exactly, but you're still that same creature that you were doing before. Where a phoenix completely rises from the ashes and is, to me, more explosive. So they move more into that spot of greatness again at some
Hmm.
point within their realm. I'm not going to say that any small business is going to turn into a Walmart or an Amazon or that kind of stuff. And that may not be great for them anyways. They don't really care. But a lot of times after a certain time, cash flow was great. So we're not talking about a startup, and we're not talking about, that sort of thing. And they were pretty great in what they were doing, and they lost leverage, and now they really need to reinvent and rise from the ashes.
Yeah.
And a fractional leader can, because of their experience over years and years of doing some of this stuff, really can come in and not only consult on it, but execute and act as part of that leadership team and be accountable. If you're a consultant, you go in, you consult, and they take your ideas, and great. If it doesn't work, then great. Where a fractional leader goes in, and just like if you had applied for a full-time equivalent, if you're not executing,
Yeah.
you're not with them anymore.
So it's kind of like Good to Great. They said, get the right people on the bus.
Yes.
And then maybe you hit a bump and you have to get some of those people off the bus and some new people on, and then the Phoenix rising.
So you're quoting like Patrick Lencioni and Gino Wickman and EOS, and you're blending Jim Collins, and you're doing all this nice little
Right.
bow tie and going, yes.
Exactly. You got to be flexible these days.
You got to be flexible these days,
Yeah.
for sure.
Well,
Yeah.
Valerie, it's been great. How can
Yeah.
people get in touch with you?
Do they want to?
Yeah. Connect on LinkedIn. You'll have a ball.
Yes. They can either get a hold of me. Yeah, LinkedIn's one of the best places to try to connect with me. And it's just, I'm boring. It's just Valerie Cobb. So if you look up Valerie Cobb, you can also go to my podcast, which I also have one called The Revenue Maze. So if you have 500 Valerie Cobbs that show up on LinkedIn, then you'll know that one. We can also, my business partner and I are www.revenuenorthstar.com, and there is a LinkedIn page for that as well. And yeah, and if you just want to shoot the breeze, I would love to hear from anybody because I'm obviously Gabby anyway.
Easy interview. I just have to ask the question and sit back.
Yes, yes. Okay.
This has been great. Really good. I really enjoyed this.
Oh, Ted, this has been so much fun. And I'm going to say that your comment that you did make about not being a jack of all trades, it really resonated. So I know when I've looked at some of the things that people are doing on LinkedIn Live and looked at how you deal with the digital minutia on LinkedIn, I really think what you're doing is a fantastic thing.
Thanks. Yeah. When I first started as a consultant, they'd bring me in and sometimes you'd be there 3 or 4 years. Now it's like, here, you're coming in for this specific task. When you're done, you're gone.
Yeah.
So it's very specialized, and that's the fractional aspect of it from all
Yes.
levels.
Yeah, totally.
Great. Well, Valerie, have a great day, and we will talk soon.
Thank you